football behind Georgia and Michigan. And I talked about how Penn State has a legitimate chance of winning the Big Ten and defeating Ohio State and defeating Michigan. And I was pretty confident. I was extremely confident in that pick. Based on what I've seen from Penn State, I talked about how Penn State had finally developed the offense to support the defense that has always been phenomenal, led by Frank Martin. But James Franklin. But it's interesting that I always talk about how how Notre Dame is highly overranked each and every year to start the season, and that whenever they're matched up with teams of that ilk of being in the top 5, the Clemsons in years past, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, teams of that ilk, the Georgias, teams of that ilk, that upper echelon, that Notre Dame gets exposed. And you can start to say that Penn State is the same way. Listen, aside from when is the last time that Penn State had a resounding victory over a top 5 opponent? Could it be Ohio State back in 2016? So you could argue that Penn State is just like Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is just like Penn State. Little overrated, perhaps. Great defense, subpar offense, and when it comes to being matched up with that upper echelon, that top tier of teams in college football, they get exposed and their true selves get revealed, and it's revealed to the public why they shouldn't be considered and talked about in the same sentence as those top tier teams. And I thought that Penn State would be able to prove me wrong and be able to prove to the country that this year they are legitimate. They're legitimate contenders for a national championship, but that just wasn't the case. And I do want to give credit to Ohio State. Listen, I'm still not sold on Ohio State either. But I've been saying that ever since their game against Notre Dame. Even with the addition of the return of Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm still not sold on Ohio State's defense or offense. Sorry, McCord is. I'm not sold on. I'm not sold on McCord at the quarterback position. But what helps Ohio State is their defense is phenomenal. I will say they have a very great defense, especially their front seven. But if we look at Ohio State, what teams have they played that have phenomenal offenses? And they played Indiana, played Youngstown State, played Western Kentucky, they played Notre Dame, they played Maryland, played Purdue. So they have yet to play a team that has a legitimate or formidable offense. Now, granted, it's the Big Ten. None of the teams in the Big Ten really have a great offense, outside of Michigan, perhaps. So, how good is Ohio State's defense? Really, you can argue that Notre Dame has a subpar offense, but no, we already know what I feel about Notre Dame. That I think they are completely overrated, even after their victory against USC last week or the week prior. And I don't think Ohio State has faced a tough enough challenge offensively for me to say, okay, yeah, their defense is phenomenal. Though it's good, they haven't faced a good challenge yet, and they won't face that challenge until they play Michigan. Until they play Michigan on the last game of the season. So, last game of the regular season, at least. So, them limiting Penn State to 12 points, it doesn't really say much in my eyes. It doesn't really do much for me. But I'm not going to discredit the victory. It's still a great victory. Because they did defeat a team that was one of the best defenses in the country, and they managed to put up 20 points against them, even with their offense being subpar. So I do want to give credit to Ohio State for getting that victory. But however, I don't want to give them too much credit. Want to kind of ease into this, and I will say this was more good Ohio State than bad Penn State, but I believe that I'm one of the guys, or one of the people, that was fooled by Penn State. I was Penn State put the wool over my eyes and fooled me because I couldn't see their deficiencies, and perhaps I refused to look at them because I was so bent on Penn State, what I saw on the defensive end. So I'm still not sold on Ohio State. I still think that Michigan is the best team in the Big Ten. I thought that Penn State would be the team to give Michigan a run for their money in the Big Ten, but I believe now that will be Ohio State, just based on who's most likely to be the other team that Michigan will play in the Big Ten championship game. But I think Michigan is a step above both of these teams, Penn State and Ohio State, either way. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that Ohio State is a legitimate title contender? Do you think they're a legitimate contender in the Big Ten? Do you think they have a legitimate chance of winning the Big Ten? Does Penn State have an outside chance of perhaps winning the Big Ten now? They'll need some help, but is it possible? And will any of these teams truly compete with Michigan when it comes down to it? Because that's really what it comes down to. The Big Ten is Michigan's conference to lose. But let me know what you guys think in the chat room. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and what you guys see from these matchups. Definitely. But in our next segment, guys, we are going to be discussing whether USC was fraudulent all along. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back.